Visitors to Savannah have heard plenty about the city's lost cemeteries. The headstones and what graves could be identified were moved as the city grew. But there are cemeteries outside of Savannah that have almost been forgotten entirely. Tucked inside a Richmond Hill neighborhood is a plot of land that began as a burial ground for enslaved people. Over the years, nature and development have slowly swallowed this historic cemetery and its stories.
But there are dedicated people working to uncover this precious part of history. Let's talk about the lost graves of Strathy Hall.
Strathy Hall Plantation was founded in the mid-1700s along the banks of the Ogeechee River. Prior to emancipation, if you were an enslaved person who died on a plantation, you would have likely been buried on a piece of land deemed unfit for farming. That could be because the soil lacked the proper nutrients to grow anything, or because it was prone to flooding.
Some burial grounds, like Strathy Hall, would continue to be used well into the 20th century. This cemetery has been used by Black churches and families whose ancestors were buried right here. In fact, the last burial in Strathy Hall happened in 1970.
Around the same time as that last burial, Strathy Hall was being converted from farmland to a neighborhood. Homes began popping up around the tiny cemetery. It didn't take long for it to be forgotten. In the past 20 years, there have been cleanup efforts by Georgia Southern University and even an Eagle Scout. But if you spent any time in the South, you know it doesn't take long for nature to reclaim things. Last year, I was tipped off to efforts from the local NAACP and neighborhood residents who were coming together to restore and finally maintain the cemetery. If you're wondering why that wasn't done sooner, it seems no one knew who owned the property. So while cleanups happened every once in a while, they didn't have any right to maintain it. Richard Appleton, who now owns the old Strathy Hall Plantation home, is an organizer behind the recent maintenance.
Pretty much the outcome of every discussion we had was we couldn't do anything if nobody owned it. And that's where I kind of looked at it more as my obligation, being that I own the old Strathy Hall Plantation house, and that house was built by these people that are resting here. So I had more of a personal connection to it, that I thought, hell, I can't sleep in that house knowing that none of these guys are having a decent resting place that's looked after.
The Bryan County NAACP, Richard, and a few other people knew it was important to preserve this part of the county's history. They went to work to find out who owned the property where the cemetery sits.
Managed to track down the owner of it. It wasn't a person, it was a company, a development company. And luckily there was only one member left. The others had passed away. And he's a great guy, he was very generous, he signed it over to us.
Finding the owner proved to be the easy part. Cleaning up the cemetery wasn't just as simple as mowing a lawn.
The biggest challenge for this has been that, number one, it was so thick, you just couldn't get through it. You would have to hack your way into it.
Seems simple, right? Just get in some equipment in to clear it out. Only they couldn't really do that without damaging fallen headstones and unmarked graves.
Now we know officially, because we've been picking up stones, that a large number of stones had been kicked over and just laying flat. Or over time, the armadillos had dug in and they had just fallen into the holes.
Due to the delicate nature of the burial grounds, the cleanup teams have to go carefully.
So what we decided to do was just come through and spray it. Spray it with a brush killer, and then once the brush was dead, we could see through into the brush. And from there we could actually find where the stones are.
When I first came here in June of 2020, they weren't quite halfway there. There was still a lot of growth, and I remember tripping over more than a few thorny vines. This time, it was much easier to walk straight through. Richard said they are about 80% there. The reason it's not done now is due in large part to the amount of fallen headstones they're still finding.
But the stones are literally sticking out 3 inches out of the ground. The rest of them is sunk into the ground over time. So it's things like that if we don't actually go through it methodically and gently. You know, it just takes one stone to get smacked and broken, and that's, you know, it's not just a resting person's headstone, it's also 300 years of history gone with it.
Many of the older headstones are handmade, names hand-etched into plaster, shells carefully pressed into them. It's evident that some of the people who created these headstones didn't have much of an education, but despite not being able to spell, they were doing what they could to make sure their loved ones weren't forgotten in death. The NAACP began tracking down existing family members of those buried in Strathy Hall. Many of them knew they had ancestors buried out there, but didn't have the ability to clean their family graves on their own.
Quite a few of them are older, so they're not physically able to help clean. They're here and they do everything they can to help clear up.
One man they contacted in Washington told Richard he knows of at least 12 of his relatives buried there. Even singer and actress Mary J. Blige has ancestors buried here.
Once the last bit of brush is cleared out, Richard said that they can properly start marking all of the graves.
Many are fallen or broken. Some are so worn you can hardly read what was carved into it. There are some records of who was buried here, but sadly, most of those records don't include the enslaved people who lived and died on the plantation.
Since I talk a lot about ghosts on this channel, you'd probably expect me to say this ground is haunted by lost souls, but when I'm here, I don't really pick up on anything. That is, until we get to the river.
When these homes were built in the 70s, people in the neighborhood were aware that there was a cemetery here. I don't know how well marked Strathy Hall Cemetery was then, but Richard said one man who grew up in the neighborhood has walked him through spots where he remembers seeing headstones as a kid.
Now, I'm not sure if the graves closer to the river were marked when these homes were being built, but I've heard accounts that after a really nasty flood just a few decades before, boaters on the river could see parts of old coffins sticking out of the riverbanks.
The people who built these homes are dead, so there's no telling if they were aware they were building on top of a cemetery. Ownership of these two homes is stuck in probate court hell right now. When I said I don't pick up on any weird energy until I get to the river, this is what I mean. There's something off about these homes. To whoever ends up getting ownership, good luck. You cannot tell me that they aren't haunted by something. As for the rest of the cemetery, Richard told me he's never felt like it's haunted. He's told me that he's been out here during all hours of the night and day without experiencing anything otherworldly. Maybe it's because the spirits know he's trying to help undo some of the wrongs that have been done. Thanks for joining me. Strathy Hall Cemetery is such a unique piece of history, but it isn't the only historic black cemetery in the area that needs saving. The Bryan County NAACP is also working to preserve the nearby Patterson Cemetery. If you'd like to help, I'm including links to Strathy Hall Cemetery and the Bryan County NAACP in the description below. Until next time, stay safe. We don't need any more ghosts.